Culture Rash. I'm Melinda Sarah. You're all very welcome back. I hope everybody had a lovely break. I'm just going to pass over to Stephen here, who is going to take us through the notice of summons for the meeting.
Thank you, Chair. So, members, you're hereby summoned to attend the monthly meeting of Governance and Strategic Planning Committee, to be held hybrid meeting conducted remotely via WebEx and physically in the Council Chamber, Guildhall, Derry. So if I take the roll call first, please, it's Alderman Cook.
Online, Stephen.
Alderman Hussey. Alderman Wilkinson.
Online, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Duffy. Sandra Duffy.
Apologies for Sandra.
Councillor Farrell. Councillor Harkin. Councillor Hart.
Anshaw, online here.
Councillor Jackson. Councillor Leonard.
Anshaw, online.
Councillor McDade. Thank you. Councillor McGinley.
Anshaw.
Councillor Mooney. Councillor Tierney. Councillor Neelis. Thank you, members.
Okay, just take you through the broadcasting statement. I would like to remind everyone physically present at this meeting or in attendance remotely that this meeting will be broadcast live to the internet and will be capable of repeated viewing. The broadcast may be terminated or suspended in accordance with our protocol. Due to your attendance at this meeting, you are consenting to being filmed and to the use and storage of those images for broadcasting or training purposes, and for the purpose of keeping historical records and making those records available to the public. Members and approved speakers are reminded to only have their mics and cameras on while speaking at the meeting, and to use the chat facility to highlight a request to speak. And a copy of our council privacy notice may be found on the council website, www.derrystrabane.com. Okay, just start with declarations of members' interests. No? Okay. So, Bwelum Fulcha Curriv our Cantor New, I would like to welcome our speaker today, and the deputation is to receive Mr. McCord, the Acting Director of Central Policy Division, Department for Communities. I've already let Mr. McCord know that there's 10 minutes for the presentation, and then we'll follow with questions.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you folks for inviting me along today to just give you a brief presentation on the history and where we are with the Executive's anti-poverty strategy. As many of you will know, it's out for public consultation now, which closes on the 19th of September. We won't be too formal about some of that because we're acutely aware that we're consulting over the summer period, so we recognise that a lot of people that will want to respond maybe haven't had the opportunity by the time it closes, so we'll not be too tight. Minister has made it clear on a number of occasions this is an open and transparent public consultation that's a vital part of the development of the strategy. It's to get the debate going, it's to get the conversation going with everybody out there. And it's all available online. We will be doing some public events. We're up here in Derry in the library, if I remember correctly, next Thursday night from 6 to 9. So if folks want to go and look at it, as I say, it's all online. There's also a full equality impact assessment, children's rights impact assessment, and a rural needs impact assessment along with this. And look, this is just one of a number of opportunities we're taking to engage with folk to let them know where we are and what we've got to. One of the things I kind of stress when I talk about this is, much as it's Department for Communities leading the development of this in a conjunction with all the other departments, it is an NI executive strategy. It will be the executive itself that makes all the decisions, and it will be the executive that owns it, not just DSC. And DSC and the departments on their own can't deliver everything that we need to eradicate poverty. So we will be looking to civic society, voluntary and community sector, and everybody to work alongside us to deliver that. Next slide, please. Just briefly, a quick history. In 2016, DSC was given responsibility for undertaking the statutory duty to produce an anti-poverty strategy. That was the transfer functions order that set up all the new departments. And it is a statutory duty, and many of you will know we've faced a couple of judicial reviews on that point over the last little while. 2020, the then Minister Deirdre Hargey And the executive agreed to a co-design approach and took that forward with a number of groups, an expert advisory panel, co-design group, cross-departmental working group, and they produced a number of recommendations papers which form the basis of a lot of what's in the strategy now. 2024, when Minister Lyons was appointed, he initiated further work on developing the strategy to reflect the new circumstances. It's been a couple of years, 3 years, nearly 2 or 3 years, with nothing happening. So just to update it, expand the evidence base. And then, as you know, in May 2025, the executive agreed for it to go out to public consultation. Next slide, please. The overarching vision of the anti-poverty strategy is working together, poverty and its impacts will be effectively and sustainably eradicated across our communities. Very challenging vision, particularly in the current economic climate and what we've gone through with COVID, cost of living crisis and what's happening around the world. And it will take all areas of the executive, civil service, civic society working together to make progress in this. In order to accomplish this vision in an effective and sustainable way, we've adopted an approach based upon a scoping review of literature on poverty in Northern Ireland that was undertaken by our Analytical Services Unit. And it was a comprehensive piece of work that focused on the risk factors which cause people to fall into poverty, what the impacts may be on people's lives and how to manage it. And that's what's given us the 3-pillar approach that you see in the draft consultation document. Next slide, please. As I say, there are 3 overarching pillars within the framework of the anti-poverty strategy. The first is minimizing the risks of falling into poverty. And the goal for that is we will minimize the risks and root causes of people and their families falling into poverty. We will work with people to maximize their chances of avoiding the risks and lower their chances of falling into poverty. And under each of these pillars, there's a range of strategic actions in the draft plan that look to do that. Pillar 2 is minimizing the impact for those currently experiencing poverty. And the goal here is where people find themselves in poverty, we will support them and ensure that inequalities are minimized and life opportunities are maximized. And finally, pillar 3 is supporting people to exit poverty, with the aim of the pillar being to support people experiencing poverty and through working together, provide them routes out of that. One of the best ways, as we know with some of that, is giving them the education and training resources, as well as a strong economy with the opportunity to access high quality, well-paid jobs. While we have the 3 pillars, they're not entirely separate, and lots of the actions that will go with underneath each of those from each of the departments will cut across each. So they're all interconnected. And it is essential that all 3 pillars deliver. Is only through a joined up approach that we will be able to break the cycle of poverty in our society and improve people's lives. Next slide, please. Just to give you a little bit more detail of each of the pillars, under the first pillar, which is minimizing the risk, the research that we based the strategy on highlighted a number of risk factors which can contribute to and cause people to fall into poverty. I'll not go through each of these in detail, but just briefly mention each as I go past. So childhood education, we know that educational attainment can be key to keeping people out of poverty in the future. So we need to look at what we can do within the education system and around the education system to ensure that those in socioeconomic disadvantage don't continue to experience the gaps in attainment that we see at present. Family and childhood factors, things such as parental income, family breakups, poor home environments, looked after children, all of those sorts of things can massively increase people's chances of experiencing poverty again in later life. So again, the strategic actions look to tackle those. Debt and the debt cycle. Some people can end up finding themselves unexpectedly in debt, then into poverty, and then getting into worse debt. And we need to tackle that through things like the advice services. Disability, there's a wide range of evidence, as everybody knows, that there are links between disability and poverty, and those with disabilities may experience poverty in different ways than those that don't. Substance use, and we're working with health through things like the substance use strategies to deal with that and help people tackle the harms associated with alcohol and drugs. And ethnicity. I suppose it's a very hot topic at this point in time in Northern Ireland, but look, we recognise from the research that ethnic origin can impact or increase the chances of certain groups of people being in poverty, so we need to tackle that. And look, you'll see within the draft strategy itself a whole range of actions, strategic actions that other departments have committed to. Education, for example, with the Extended Schools Programme, RAISE, DFC with the debt respite scheme, and the financial wellbeing strategy. The disability and disability employment strategies that DFC will also take forward. Next slide, please. Second pillar is minimising the impacts. And again, I'm not going to go through these in great detail, but as you will see on the slide, there is a whole range of areas that we know we need to tackle. Access to resources being one of the big ones for this area, but also access to education, physical and mental health, exposure to crime, the impact of place, housing, including fuel poverty, and somewhere along the line within the whole structure of this, we need to get better at understanding and taking on board and involving those with a lived experience of poverty. And finally, there are the advice services to support them while they are in this position. And actions here will include things like the housing strategy, the fuel poverty strategy, promotion of benefit uptake through Make the Call, the ongoing delivery of the current welfare mitigations package. Next slide, please. Nearly there, folks. Exiting poverty. The final pillar focuses on helping people hopefully exit poverty through looking at the employment and economic conditions in Northern Ireland and growing a strong economy with a wide range of good jobs across both the public and private sector, providing opportunities that are accessible to all. Providing clear pathways to work, under gaining employment, and supporting people in developing skills and behaviours that they need to access and prosper in the workplace. Training and further education. Young people and adults will be able to develop their skills and careers through a range of supported educational initiatives beyond school. And childcare, which is one that's come up quite a bit throughout the development work of this, and things, as you know, Department of Education are trying to take forward in that arena. Next slide. Next slide, please. Just a little bit on the governance. As an executive strategy, it will be overseen at NICS level by a single anti-poverty strategy board chaired by the head of the civil service and attended by senior civil servants from all departments. The board will meet regularly to assess the effectiveness of the strategy and agree changes on information provided by the 3 strategy subcommittees. Head of the civil service, Jane Brady, has also made it clear that she wants a mechanism in there, that 2 mechanisms really. One that provides the direct voice of those with lived experience into the strategy board, but also the wider civic society can be involved in helping govern the strategy, but challenge the action and whether or not it's being delivered. The 3 subcommittees, there'll be one for each of the 3 pillars, and hopefully will be chaired by relevant permanent secretaries. We're still working with head of the civil service on all the finer detail of this bit, but certainly pillar 2 is likely to be Department for Communities lead, because a lot of the actions that fall within the strategy fall in our area. Pillar 3, we're hoping economy, because a lot of the work that needs to be done will be theirs. And pillar 1, we're hoping education and health, particularly with a focus on the early years, early learning and childcare strategy, children and young people strategy. If minimising the risk of poverty is about getting it right for the next generation, making sure that they have the tools and don't fall in. Next slide, please. I'm really not going to run through this at all in detail, folks. Monitoring wise, there will be an action plan developed to go with the strategy that will have a whole range of targets and measures within it for the specific programmes and projects that the departments will take forward to deliver against their strategic actions. But at the strategy level, these are the measures that we're proposing. All of them are official statistics and they're all relevant to most of the actions that are within there. The big overall measures are some of the poverty statistics that the Department for Communities already gather. And the reason we use relative poverty after housing costs is for all 4 jurisdictions within the UK, we measure the same things in that basket, so it makes it all directly comparable. For the rest of the measures, including absolute poverty, whether that's before or after housing costs, England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland all measure slightly different things in that basket, so it makes a direct read across rather difficult. So that's why that's been chosen. And as I say, we will have a whole range of measures underneath that have specific targets. And then finally, there will be a formal midpoint review. 5 years in, it's a 10-year strategy as proposed. However, the action plan will be a rolling action plan that will be continually monitored through the governance mechanism. And part of the reason for that is we recognise with the former child poverty strategy that we had to go to Public Accounts Committee around, that there was, a couple of hundred actions under that for each of the departments or across all of the departments, and it became a tick box exercise. People thought they had to keep going with the programs that were in there, even if they weren't actually helping deliver against poverty. Rolling action plan through the governance mechanism, the hope is that we will be able to be more proactive and reactive. So if after 2 years, one of the projects in, say, education or health or DSC isn't working, isn't delivering, that we look to where we transfer that money to within the strategy and its actions to get a better bang for our buck and make sure that it is actually delivering for folks on the ground. Thank you, Chair.
John, thank you. So I'm going to take a series of questions, if that's okay with you, John, and then I'll just let you answer them all in one go. Might not be questions, it might be comments, but our first indicated speaker is Councillor Farrell.
Thank you, Chair, and John, thanks for coming. I'd just like to welcome you on behalf of the SDLP. Poverty, and specifically child poverty, is a real issue across this council area. We've had numerous discussions and debates over the years about the absence of an anti-poverty strategy. We've got a specific working group dedicated to tackling poverty right across this city and district. And we had high hopes for the anti-poverty strategy when we saw the expert panel's suite of recommendations. It was full of imagination, full of ideas and full of promise. And when we saw the draft strategy released, it was devoid of ambition, devoid of aspiration, and in our view, devoid of any meaningful actions to tackle poverty. We're deeply disappointed. We're completely underwhelmed. And we've waited 17 years for this, and it hasn't been worth the wait. And so I'm going to touch on 3 specific aspects of the draft strategy. As I had mentioned previously, we had the expert panel that produced a suite of recommendations. They invested time, energy, enthusiasm. They produced a really, really comprehensive report that's been ignored. So there was various recommendations on there. There was a recommendation for a new child payment. There was a recommendation to remove the 2-child limit. There was a recommendation to allow people in universal credit, new claimants, to claim a severe disability premium. There was a recommendation to abolish the bedroom tax. And there is a host of recommendations, and it'll get really boring really quickly if I ask you for a reason why each one was not included in the draft strategy. But could you give us some indication of why the recommendations put forward by the expert panel are not reflected in this draft strategy? The second thing I'd like to touch on would be there are a number of sort of sweeping, vague statements included in the strategy with no budget, no action plan. And one I'm going to focus on specifically is about housing. It says, we will ensure that everyone including those in or at risk of poverty, has access to good quality, affordable and sustainable homes. So that is, an ambition. We hope it's realised at some stage in the future. But earlier this year, in January, when the programme for government was finally approved, it said over the next 3 years, we're going to build around 6,000 new homes. So it's about 1,950 homes per year. Then, a number of weeks before this strategy was produced, the executive says we can't afford 2,000 homes a year, we will only afford 1,000. So my question is, in terms of housing, how can the executive parties which have signed up to this strategy be actually serious about tackling housing when they haven't put the budget behind it? 1,000 new builds a year across the entire north is not going to put a dent in the housing list. There's 44,000 across the north waiting to be housed. There's over 6,000 in this council area alone. Housing is one of the costs, massive costs, a massive percentage of people's income. If you can't fix housing, there's going to be spiraling in poverty. The budget that is currently allocated to housing across the entire north is not what's needed. We need sustained investment in housing. So how can the executive be realistic about including that in that document? And my final question, we're well aware that there's 75 organisations and individuals who have written an open letter to executive ministers about this strategy. They said it's not fit for purpose. It needs to be withdrawn. So my final question is, this strategy, what difference do you see it is going to make to people right across this city, right across this council, right across this north that are struggling to make ends meet? They're struggling financially because this document, there's nothing tangible in there. There's nothing measurable. So what modelling has DFC or other departments done in terms of this document as it sits, this document, whatever funding is attached to it, is it going to reduce poverty? Are there targets for poverty levels, economic inactivity, all that sort of stuff? What target? There's monitoring there, but where are the actual targets? So that's all I have to say. I'm conscious that you didn't write this, you didn't devise this. Unfortunately, you're here to present to us, so you're a brave man.
Okay, Garmayoga, Councillor Farrell, and the next indicated speaker is Councillor Hutton.
Thank you very much, Chair, for letting me in, because I'm not a member of the committee. And thanks, John, for coming along today to do this presentation. I am a member of the Task and Finish group within Council in relation to the anti-poverty strategy, as is Councillor Farrell. So most of the questions that he has asked today is the questions that we have drafted a response to this strategy through the Task and Finish group. So I won't reiterate all of them, but I just would like to pass a few comments in relation to the paper that arrived in front of us all. And I think there was a stark realisation that whatever co-design group, whatever expert panel, the 75 organisations that were brought together, with some that were excluded. There were some organisations that should have been part of that makeup, but they weren't. It was clear to see that none of their opinions and their strategies did form part of the anti-poverty strategy that came from the Department for Communities. I think that was very worrying, because most of the people that sat on those expert panels, we had numerous meetings throughout the city with community organisations, lived experience groups. Those are the people who are on the ground, listening to people who are living in poverty and realising ways that they could be assisted in order to come out of that poverty. So that was really, really worrying, that the fact that that none of their recommendations were included within that report. It has given me the opinion that this was a tokenistic consultation, because the input that may have been sought by the co-design groups, it genuinely wasn't integrated within any strategy that I had read. And I think that it will give the community sector and people who are living in poverty and any organisations that are trying to work with people who are living in poverty, they will lose trust in any type of process that is being designed or that is coming from the Department for Communities. They are the decision makers at the end of the day, and in my opinion, they're choosing actions that fit budgets and timelines, and it's even different from any recommendations that have been made. So I think at this stage, the consultation that's going to be happening on the 11th of September is probably coming a wee bit too late. People need to be aware of all of these issues. The Executive Office and the Department for Communities have worked on this to try and bring it to fruition, but the consultation process needs to go on a wee bit longer. There is an item coming on the agenda here today, and it's our draft response from the Task and Finish group, but that's not the only opinion that's needed here. The public consultation needs to be rolled out again, and people need to be able to voice their opinions on how they feel this strategy has failed, what they were expecting. So I think all of those questions that Rory had given, that had asked, those are the type of questions that our Task and Finish group had come up with, and those are the type of questions that we will be putting in as an official consultation response. So again, thank you, John. But as I say, there are serious concerns, and it's not just from us sitting here in these chairs. There are serious concerns in the community and voluntary sector. People feel that it was a waste of time, because most of the stuff that they had recommended through listening to people with lived experience and working in the jobs that they've done for over 30 years, it hasn't been put into the strategy. So that's what I wanted to speak about today. So thanks again for coming along, and I hope that all of this is passed on to the relevant bodies.
Councillor Hunton, and next we have Councillor Harkin.
Thank you, Chair, for letting me in, and thank you, John, for coming in today. And I think I'm glad that you're here today because we are in the period of consultation. And the only thing I think I'll agree with you on today is that this is an executive strategy, that it is not a strategy of one party, that it is an executive strategy. And I think that that is important, given the comments from the Sinn Féin representative. It is a DUP minister's document, but it was widely discussed at the executive table before it was released for consultation. And Michelle O'Neill, at the time when it was released, simply said it could have went further, which I think is an absolute disgrace. To say that flies in the face of the discussion that's taking place right now, right across the north, because the reaction to this document has been negative across the board. Even the Ulster Farmers Union have signed on to a statement saying that this should be scrapped and binned and should never have been brought forward in the first place. And that's what's so frustrating about it, because we have waited for more than a decade for this document, for this strategy. It's not acceptable to say that this was to start a debate. We've had the debate. We have entrenched poverty in the north of Ireland, 25% child poverty here in Derry. And we have been looking to government now to actually create a strategy to address it. And that this does the opposite. There is no strategy to address deprivation and poverty in this document. There's 200 people meeting today in Antrim at a conference of people from anti-poverty organisations, trade unions, community groups, and the goal is to get the executive to reject this policy, this consultation, to scrap the document, because there is nothing in this document that will actually address what it was set up for. There isn't a single target. There is no targets that would say we have 25% child poverty in Derry and Strabane district. And our goal over the next 5 years is to reduce that to 15%, not a single target that can be measured. So I think that the executive has wasted our time with this document, and it's actually angered people. And rather than getting on with doing something about entrenched deprivation and poverty that impacts people right across communities here, we have a document that is spinning wheels. It is meant to take up our time when there is complete and utter inaction. So it seems to me that the strongest possible message that can be sent to the minister and to the executive from the consultation, from this council, from the conference that's taking place today, is that one, the executive should have never green-lighted this document to be released for public consultation. That's how disgraceful it is. That's how useless the content is. And it needs to be taken back to the minister and back to the executive, and something needs to be drafted that is actually based on much of what the expert panel proposed, based on all the research that they did, all the work that they did. And that's why there was a bit of hope. But look, the executive has destroyed that hope for the time being, and the only way forward is getting rid of this consultation document. That'll be the first thing that needs to happen. And if that doesn't happen, it's clear that the executive is clearly not listening. Thank you.
Okay, Garmagat. And next we have Councillor Donnelly.
Garmagat, Chair. Chair, just to follow on some of the comments made by previous speakers regarding no targets. There are no targets because there's no intention. I think we have to remember that this was inserted anti-poverty strategy in what's known as St Andrews in 2006, and here we are in 2025, and what's called a strategy isn't really a strategy. And the High Court in Belfast had found the Stormont Executive Committee in breach of its legal obligation to adopt a strategy. And I would say that that's why this thing was cobbled together and thrown out, to give the impression that there's a strategy. 50 charities and anti-poverty organisations actually wrote a letter, and within that letter they said, quote, "It is more harmful to have a strategy that will not address poverty than no strategy at all." And I think this is what's happening here. What's going on in Stormont, or whatever's not going on in Stormont, this is an attempt to fool people. And, poverty is a deliberate policy. It's deliberate policy and decisions and priorities made by choice. And that's what's happening in Stormont. There's no will to deal with this. And in the meantime, schools will struggle with breakfast clubs, cost of living, uniforms, stationery. And our young people, particularly young people in working class areas, are being disadvantaged when they're going to school with an empty stomach. They're not able to concentrate. And the reality is Stormont has absolutely no intention to do anything about this. Thank you.
Okay, and Garmagat. And then the last indicated speaker is Councillor Mooney.
Thank you, Chair. I'll not be long, and I mean, thank you to John for coming down, but really it's just to follow on from previous speakers, and more so I think Councillor Donnelly made the point I'm going to make, but that this issue has been sort of going on for 18 years. Councillor Donnelly did say that there was a very recent High Court decision, but we have to remember there was one in 2015 as well. This is the second adverse decision that has come out from the High Court about this strategy and about the department's failure, and I suppose the executive's failure to deal with it. And really looking through it and looking through the documents that have come out and everybody's commentary here, is what you can tell is that it's quite clearly that the minister or the department felt the heat come on after the 5th of March this year, and clearly just rammed this out the door and thought, we need to get this out the door, because obviously we've run the back of 2 adverse decisions and we can't keep this up. And today, what we feel now and what we see now is the fact that we have 70 organisations who are clearly at odds with this strategy, and again we're back to square one. And it's really, really a demoralising day for anybody in this campaign in the sector, they find that where we are is we've got a strategy that's basically dead from the day one. Thank you, Chair.
Garamagan, okay, John, so if you want to come back, quite a few questions there to get through, so if you just want to do them speaker by speaker.
I'll try my best here, and some of this, folks, as an official, I can't comment on because some of those are political points that are not within my remit as an official. But if I try and deal with the questions that have been posed, first really was why recommendations of the expert advisory panel are not in this. Minister, the executive and officials would rebut that to a level in that, yes, there are a number that you've mentioned, two-child limit, child payment, etc., that aren't in there, but a lot of what was asked for by the expert advisory panel is there. So the ongoing welfare reform mitigations, I'm trying to remember these off the top of my head. I used to have a printed sheet out, I don't with me, but doing something around fuel poverty, doing something around the housing strategy are the DFC measures that I know off the top of my head, increasing incomes through Make the Call, etc. So there is a lot of the work of the expert advisory panel recommendations in the co-design group that is reflected in the recommendations. There are some that aren't, and that's recognised, and that'll be represented to the executive when we go back through the system. So once we have everything back from the consultation, they will be given all the evidence again, as they were the first time. The executive have all considered the expert advisory panel report, the co-design group report, etc. So that is all there. That will be backed up by whatever evidence and everything that comes in from the consultation. And as officials, we'll do our standard job of, here are your options, you make your choices. So, as I say, and Minister, if you look at the debates that have occurred within the Assembly, Minister has done a comprehensive list, and there are answers to AQs that outline where we would rebut that, and Minister would rebut that, and the Executive would as well. The housing question, how can the Executive be serious about housing with current budget needs sustained investment? Minister has made that point on a number of occasions in the House and at the Executive, and has been quite clear that we know there isn't the investment at this stage to deliver. I worked in a housing division for 10 years when we did actually meet the 2000 target, and even then we knew that that target wasn't enough to keep. It wasn't even keeping pace. We were well behind around the housing waiting lists. But we are in and I am going to do a standard civil servant line. You know, we are in a period where the budget is tight, and those will be there will be choices made around that. And that is, as you say, the Executive have to make that choice based on the evidence that we give them around all of this. As an official, I can't answer the question, how are they serious about housing with the current budget that's assigned to it? It's not in my purview. And Councillor Farrell, your last question around the open letter withdrawing the strategy, modelling targets for economic modelling, all of that sort of thing. What I have said to other groups that we've been out and about around the action plan, which we're working on with the other departments, will have the programmes and projects that should deliver against the strategic actions that each of them have offered us in this plan. They will all have a set of measures and targets and the budget attached to those. So we will have them at that operational level. Our challenge as officials, and it'll be a challenge for the Executive as well, is we are putting out a regional strategy to look at eradicating poverty. Lots of regional strategies will have those high-level strategic action statements in there. We have to marry the two, because most of what solves poverty is done on the ground. It is done in place. You know, we have the people in place review, neighbourhood renewal. That's where we see the action changing. So that's still to be fashioned completely, and we are talking with our colleagues in other departments around that. Around the other points that folks have made, around tokenistic consultation, serious concerns. Look, we take all of those on board. We will do our job as officials. We will present all of this and what the options are, what the budgets are, what the pros are, what the cons are, and those decisions will be made at executive level. So that there's little else I could say, I think, in some ways on this. I am, as an official, really pleased that folks recognize it's an executive strategy. And despite some of the points being made that I can't tackle as an official on political points, that is the bit that we are working with through trying to get the governance mechanism, etc., right, to make sure that there is the buy-in across all ministers, all departments, and that there will be realistic delivery within the action plan and programme. There will be options provided to the executive, as there were at the draft stage, around overall poverty targets and poverty reduction targets around that. It will be, again, for their decisions, not ours as officials. And folks, we will continue to work with the voluntary and community sector. We've met what was the anti-poverty strategy co-design group in smaller groups on issues areas, so the likes of legal and union, children, older people again recently, and I'm meeting them as their new formation is the anti-poverty strategy group before the end of the consultation. Look, we take on board the issue around extension. That'll be a question again for the executive that we'll have to ask them whether we can go ahead and do that. I probably shouldn't say this publicly, but look, we're not going to go the 19th. The 19th is the formal cutoff because we need to start some point doing the analysis of what comes in, but we're not going to be overly strict as officials around that because we within the team can accommodate things coming in for a little while after that. And I think that's about as much as I can say, folks. And I am sorry, as an official, it's really awkward. There are times you have to bite your tongue. And there are times as a policy and strategy specialist, I train other civil servants in engagement and consultation. And I've only been in this post a year, so it's been a massive learning curve. But I continue to make the point to those that I train, this isn't my policy and it isn't for me, much as we get passionately involved in what we work on. And I have all 5 social inclusion strategies, so with disability, gender, LGBTQ and active aging as well. These are ministers and the executive's policies. And you know what that means. Sorry. Anything else?
I'll just, if you keep it brief then, because we've already had the chance for questions.
It will be brief. Chair, John, thank you for your response. I know, given your role, that you can't be as open and honest and say as much as you really want to say, and I totally appreciate that. I accept what you've said about the monitoring, the targets. You have to wait for the consultation responses to come back, but I think it is completely disingenuous of this strategy to say that the executive will ensure that everyone has access to good quality, affordable, sustainable homes, when we know for a fact there are 44,000 families out there who don't. So I think the wording of that needs to be revisited because it's misleading, very misleading.
Okay, that's us. John, as we said, Gurmila Mayagav, thank you very much for coming here today and talking us through this, and you're free to leave.
Thank you for the opportunity. And folks, just as said, everybody get your responses in, and the organizations that you work with, tell them the same. It's through the evidence that we can continue to refine and make this better. Thank you.
Okay, moving on there into the main part of the meeting, I haven't had any Grana Caherly, I haven't had any chairperson's business. So we'll move on to matters arising from the open minutes of the Governance and Strategic Planning Committee held on Tuesday, the 1st of July, 2025. Councillor Harkin.
Just before we move to matters arising from the last meeting, Stephen there called around today to committee members about a matter to do with a jobs fair and the participation of the armed forces. I think that this is something I think we should discuss in open business rather than doing it in confidential. So if you would, if you're willing, I think it would be useful to do that now.
That will be dealt with at the end of the meeting. Councillor Donnelly.
Obviously, thanks for letting me in, but obviously I'm not a member of this committee. But if I'm picking Councillor Hargan up, that there's a discussion about a British Army recruitment session, and this is being discussed in confidential, and you're refusing to bring that out of confidential, is that accurate?
I just said that it would be discussed at the end of the meeting.
Thank you. Sorry, I picked that up wrong. I apologise. And can I ask, you see an issue?
Right. This is just, we're just doing chairperson's business now. If you didn't bring any chairperson's business to me, then we'll carry on with the agenda.
I was just looking for clarification why other members hadn't got the same opportunity that the committee members of council. It might be a reason, but
So just for clarity, it's an issue to raise. This is clearly not a decision-making body, but I do need a steer in this issue. I did ring round party leaders and members who were on committee just so as to give a heads up, but it'll be open for all members to hear what I'm going to say.
Okay, moving on as planned into any matters arising.
Indicated there.
Do you have chairperson's business?
No, I indicated to speak on that topic that you just heard there.
That will be discussed at the end of the meeting. If we can just keep with the agenda as planned, please.
And when
Councillor
it is,
Tierney.
will that be an open business when we're discussing it at the end of the meeting? Will that be an open business or is that going to be in confidential?
Happy for it to go into open business is not an issue, but can we just keep with the agenda as planned, please? Okay, any matters arising from the open minutes? Councillor Harkin.
Thank you, Chair. It's GSP 14625, and I think that a number of us have committed to using our platforms to raise the issue of the genocide in Gaza at every opportunity. And obviously what is happening right now in Gaza continues to be absolutely horrific. We have the Israeli army, the Israeli occupying army invading Gaza City and aiming to displace 1 million people, killing people at food collection sites on a daily basis. And we also have a meeting held at the White House, attended by Tony Blair, that is planning the future of Gaza without the Palestinian people, which is absolutely disgusting and should be condemned and has been condemned. We also have had in the last couple of days a panel of academics who study genocide, confirming what we already know and what we've witnessed for the last 2 years, that this is a genocide that's being carried out with the funded by the United States government, backed by the British government, and backed by many other Western governments. So I want to commend everybody that continues to act and speak out and demonstrate in support of Gaza and calling for an end to the genocide. There haven't been many victories over the last couple of years, but there have been some significant ones. And I do think we should welcome the announcement that the Central Bank of Ireland will no longer be a site for the sale of Israeli genocide bonds that have been used to fund the slaughter that's taken place inside Gaza. as you would know, Chair, this is something that we as a council have supported on numerous occasions, calling on the central bank to no longer sell Israeli bonds, calling on the Irish government to end the sale of Israeli bonds. And it is something where people were marching and demonstrating in large numbers. And I think it is because of those protests and those mass marches and the protests that were taking place at the central bank and the actions of employees there that the decision has now been confirmed. I think that this is what BDS is: boycott, divestment, and sanction. And if we can see this now happen across the world, I think it will. These are the types of actions that will constrain Israel's ability to continue to slaughter people. There's other demands that the Irish government continue to drag their heels on, like the Occupied Territories Bill. We have issues here in the north with the Invest NI and the funding of businesses that are complicit or could be complicit with the genocide. But I think that this shows that where there is public pressure and action and people power, it can actually force governments to do things that they don't want. And I will just mention that a couple of things that are happening. There's a massive global flotilla heading to try and break the siege. And there's people from Derry participating in that, people from Ireland. And I want to just send solidarity to them because it is dangerous, but necessary. And this Saturday is a global day of action for Gaza, to end the genocide, to let the aid in. And I want to just encourage people to participate in the actions in Derry and across the island this Saturday that are happening globally. Thank you, Chair.
Garmagat, and Councillor Donnelly says in the same agenda item, yeah.
Chair. Chair, just on the back of what Councillor Harkin has said regarding the state and its crackdown on those who are opposing the genocide, I think it's also important to mention that as a result of that activism, Councillor Harkin has now found herself before a court, and in the past, when other members in here were before a court, this council sent the legal observers, and I think I'm not a member of this committee, but I think it's something that should be considered. Thank you.
Garmagat, and Councillor McDade.
Thank you, Chair. And I suppose just to put our sentiments with what Councillor Harkin and Donnelly have already said, we need to continue to bring this up at every opportunity and just highlight it constantly. And I know there's a lot of events on Saturday, so encourage everybody to go out to whatever they can. And I would be happy if you need a proposal. I'd be happy to propose what Gary Donnelly has suggested there around the legal observer at court, which is what we've done previously for members. If you need it in writing, let me know. For a second. Thank you.
Councillor Jackson.
Member Chair, and again, echo the sentiments that were expressed earlier. It is disgusting what we're seeing unfolding and what has been unfolding for many years in Gaza in particular. And I know that the recent reports that verify that a famine is ensuing within Gaza comes as no surprise to the people here or anybody that's watching what's happening. But whilst it's not surprising, it is extremely disheartening, given the fact that there's governments watching on whilst a famine is ensuing. It's gross negligence, and I'm glad to see that there's people within this chamber that are recognising the complicity of the British government, because that is for the last number of years, that complicity has been largely ignored by some people, and I suppose if we're going to be a voice, if we're going to continue to stand alongside the Palestinian people, we need to be challenging that complicity, and we need to be challenging all those that are turning a blind eye to what's going on. We, as a party, fully endorse the Global Day of Action this Saturday. And we are watching with keen interest in relation to the global flotilla that is leaving on September the 4th. I know there's party activists, there's elected representatives that are part of that global flotilla, and it's something that we're really proud to play a part in, and hopefully that continues to shine a light in those that are helping are complicit in the famine that is ensuing in Gaza. So we would again encourage everybody to attend, and everybody, more importantly, everybody to be welcomed at the day of action that's scheduled for this week. Solidarity must mean solidarity, and I think in recent times there's been solidarity events where people have been excluded from, and that doesn't serve the people of Palestine. Solidarity needs to mean solidarity, and those that seek sow divisions within the solidarity movement need to think twice in relation to their actions. But I want to, and again, in the spirit of solidarity, just hope that this weekend is an opportunity for everybody to stand together and put the people of Palestine, and particularly the people of Gaza, first and foremost in our actions. Thanks, Chair.
Cormac, okay, so we had a proposal there from Councillor McDaid. Yep. Okay, and that's seconded by Councillor Farrell. Okay, so I'm going to put this to Stephen to see if we need to do a vote for this. Okay, I'll just ask first, is there any dissent on that proposal before we put it to a vote? Catherine, do you want to repeat what the proposal was, just for the minutes?
Yeah, just that council send a legal observer to the court hearings for the people who have been charged for peaceful protest. Thank you.
Do we have dissent in the room?
You do, yeah.
Okay, I'm just going to pass it over to Stephen then to take a vote on that.
Thank you, Chair. So Alderman Cook,
Against.
Alderman Hussey,
Against.
Alderman Wilkinson,
Against.
Councillor Farrell,
Or
Councillor Harkin,
I'm going to abstain, Chair, because I've got an interest in this.
thank you. Councillor Hart,
Ta.
Councillor Jackson,
Ah.
Councillor Leonard,
Ta.
Councillor McDaid, Councillor McGinley, Councillor Mooney, Councillor Tierney, Councillor Neelis. Thank you.
Okay, so that's 9 for, 3 against and 1 abstention. So the motion carries the proposal. Okay, do we have any other matters arising from the open minutes? No? Yep. No. Okay, so moving on to agenda item number 8 then. So that's a consultation response to the NI anti-poverty strategy.
Thank you, Chair. Members, I'm very conscious that you've had quite a considerable discussion following the presentation from DFC. And what I wanted to highlight is that many of your comments obviously are included within the draft response that has been prepared. And in preparing that draft response, we have had a meeting with our anti-poverty working group elected members who were very keen that we would present a position to yourselves with respect to the draft strategy. Members, we've also had conversations with a number of the key organisations who are involved in anti-poverty work within our council area. And, you know, basically all the comments that are included within that strategy are reflective of what their current position is in relation to that. So whenever we have included, you know, that there's no evidence of the anti-poverty expert panel's recommendations been included, we genuinely were unable to find that. Now, obviously, the department will come back and respond to that as they've done today with respect to how they feel that they have been incorporated. The key observation that I have that maybe we haven't reflected sufficiently is the breakdown of trust. So that has come across very strongly in relation to many of those organisations that you have been speaking with and that we've been speaking with. And so I think it would be appropriate to include that. And members, whilst it wasn't acknowledged within your discussion, I just want to reassure you that the rural issues have also been covered within our draft response, because there was certainly from our reading of it, there wasn't sufficient attention given to rural poverty and the needs within the rural area. So happy to take any additional comments or any things that members might want included. Thank you.
Garmaya for that. And we have one indicated speaker at the minute, and that's Councillor Hutton.
Thank you, Chair, for letting me in. Obviously, I can't propose this in it, but I just wanted to speak on behalf of the group. And most of the members are here today that have been attending the meetings, and to acknowledge the amount of work that has gone in to get this response to where it is today. I think it's safe to say that everybody was pretty angry about what was presented to us by the DFC, and the Minister does need to be aware of the issues that arise. The issue of trust that I spoke to John about is a massive piece as well. These community and voluntary sectors who are supporting people day and daily, supporting families, young children, they will not trust this document unless it is done properly. But it's also to acknowledge the work that's been done by yourself and Linda. It has been 100%. You're on the ball with any recommendations. They're all listed out. We've got the email, particularly the stuff around the child's rights. We are looking for that accolade at the minute through UNICEF, and child poverty is on the rise. We know what the outworkings of child poverty are in relation to adverse childhood experiences, education, lifestyle, health and well-being. So that is of paramount importance. But it's to commend you as well for the amount of work, and all of us who showed up at the meetings and looked at this report and saw the flaws within it. And I suppose we were thinking about our district, but we should be thinking of everybody as a whole. And I think there's just one thing that we had discussed that maybe isn't in there, and that was the discussion around UBI, that universal basic income. That had been discussed in and around the time that there was a proposal for an anti-poverty strategy, and it was something that they were looking at piloting here. That working group has ceased. So it's just maybe to inquire about what's happening around that, but to thank you as a team. And it is very inspiring to see that there is so much passion around this. It's coming from a genuine place. Sometimes politics take a backseat when it comes to us serving people on the ground and actually caring about how they're living their lives and how we can make that better. So it's to say thanks to everybody that has been involved. Thank you.
Councillor Hutton, Councillor Hargan.
Thank you, Chair. And first of all, thank you to Una for the presentation, and thank you to Una and Linda for putting together the proposed consultation response. And I'm happy to propose it because I think it's really excellent. I think it takes on board a lot of the criticisms that have been discussed, and anything that is lacking in this document, I think will be addressed by all the other organisations across the board that are putting in extremely robust consultation responses. And I fully endorse the final paragraphs, which is that the anti-poverty strategy as presented is a missed opportunity without clear priorities, measurable targets, allocated budgets, a delivery plan or robust accountability. It cannot credibly claim to offer a strategic response to poverty. Council would strongly urge the executive to redraft the strategy in line with the co-design group's original recommendations, embedding the voices of those with lived experience, as this will ground the plan in reality rather than assumptions. I think that's brilliant, and I fully endorse that. I think that's a proper response from this council. And I think that this council is in a very good position to actually offer advice to the executive. One, because we developed our own anti-poverty strategy, which is actually far better and has more in it than what the executive had produced. And we actually developed our own anti-poverty strategy in the absence of the executive's anti-poverty strategy in order to encourage the executive to actually come up with something. And that's why this is such a massive failed opportunity. I think that, so I welcome our council sending a very, very strong message to the executive that what they have put together is completely unacceptable and it's harmful, it's anti-community. It's actually, if this policy stays in place, it will actually harm people in our communities.
Very good. And Councillor Farrell?
Yeah, thank you, Chair, again. And like others, I'd like to thank Una for a really detailed and direct response. You didn't mince your words at all. You know, the feedback that you got from the Anti-Poverty Task and Finance Group, or Working Group as it's now called, I think everything's included there. I think it's probably one of the best consultation responses I've seen coming from this council in a very, very long time. But it's important that we are open and honest about the failure of this draft anti-poverty strategy. We don't support the strategy. We don't support the direction of travel. I don't know how it got executive approval. So our job is to give them feedback, and that feedback is there. So the executive need to revisit this. They need to get this right. And as I said previously, you know, we've been waiting 17 years for this. So our view is the strategy is not fit for purpose. They need to do a hell of a lot of work to try and win the trust of people that are expecting delivery from this government. The starting point is re-engaging with the expert panel. You know, they had so many great suggestions, ways forward that are ignored. You know, so they might include a couple of things that, you know, didn't cost any money, weren't that difficult to implement, but the ones that would put money in people's pocket were removed, were ignored completely. So that's, you know, if you want to lift people out of poverty, the start is that you give them more money. And the strategy doesn't do that at all. So your response is excellent. So thanks to yourself and Linda. And let's see what the government response to this is, because that's going to be very interesting. Thank you.
Can we have it, Councillor Farrell? Any second in that? Seconded by Councillor Farrell. Okay, and next up, Alderman Hussey.
Thank you, Chair, and like others, thank you for a tremendous amount of work done, putting together all of those thoughts that have come out of the Task and Finish Group, Working Group, whatever it's called. I think a very pertinent comment was made earlier that, you know, council could tell the executive or teach the executive how this should be done. And that's because councillors on the ground are closer to the actual issues and know what the issues are. And I think some of the folk on the Hill have lost their way with regard to what's actually occurring. It was also mentioned there that if there are bits missing from our contribution, that, you know, they will be added to as we go forward in the process. And I certainly hope that that will be the case on Thursday at the NILGA event in Craigavon, when the anti-poverty strategy again will be debated with, I don't know who's coming to actually present it out there, but again, NILGA will have the opportunity, and the document that we have in front of us will prove extremely useful going forward. And as I said earlier, you know, if there are gaps, I'm certain that others will be able to find them. But thank you, Una, for the work that's been done. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Alderman Hussey, and we're moving on now then to agenda item number 9, and that's Alfie with the financial outturn report for quarter 1.
Thank you, Chair. Members, the report is for you to consider and approve our 3-month outturn and position at 31st of June. Just quickly, by way of context, you'll recall back in February of this year, we agreed an overall £81.85 million budget for the year, and that's summarised for you in the table in section 2.1 of the report. We also contain a contingency reserve coming into this financial year, because of the various uncertainties, risks and unbudgeted pressures that we potentially could face, including in particular the non-domestic revaluation appeals provision, which I'll touch on later in the report. So members, within that context, the draft outturn report for quarter 1 is attached in Appendix 1 for your consideration, and it's summarised in the table in section 3.1 of the report. I would point out initially this is obviously a very early stage in the financial year, but the broad message is that services are being managed within budget, and we are able to report a positive variance of 308k at this stage. The key contributor to that position you will see in the report is investment interest. We have significant sums of money on deposit due members to monies that we have earmarked for our very ambitious capital plans. These are invested currently at high interest rates across a number of money market funds, secured deposits and also other councils, all of which are highly secure and in line with the strategy we approved as part of the recent rates process. Against that, the key pressure relates to our reserves reduction strategy. You'll be aware that we continue to fund a sum of 900k from our reserves each year. That effectively represents a planned overspend, and the plan shows that we need to reduce that to 550k as part of the upcoming rates process. That would have a 0.47% rates impact. And on the assumption that we prefer to avoid that, what we have proposed is making some interim provision throughout this year, so that pressure can effectively be alleviated from the upcoming rates process. Other than that, members, services are broadly within budgets. A few of our service areas are ahead from an income perspective, mainly building control, environmental health grants, and also the additional income we're getting as a result of the Dairy Girls exhibition. We have a small variance in relation to rate support grant, as we budgeted for a cut during the rates process, and thankfully no cut has materialised and the grant's been retained at its 24-25 level. In that regard, members, we await the conclusion of the Minister's ongoing review of the grant. We have a meeting this Friday with officials, so hopefully that will provide some clarity in relation to when that will conclude. In relation to the ongoing appeal by Mid-Ulster Council in relation to the cuts, that judgment has been issued and was successful on one of the 4 grounds initiated. However, no remedy has yet been issued, so we await the outcome of that. So members, there are a couple of issues which haven't been reported as variances within the report, but which are significant, and I'll just draw them to your attention. So firstly, as I touched on at the start, Land and Property Services are forecasting a 60k positive rates finalisation. Again, it is very early in the financial year, but the key message from that is there's fairly significant domestic rates growth, which is very positive. However, any non-domestic rates growth that we have has effectively been totally wiped out by the outcome of appeals, and that's a risk that I continue to highlight, and that's why we have provision within our contingency reserve for that. The second issue, members, you may recall from the rates process that we're in receipt of a new levy as compensation for the costs that we incur for collection and disposal of packaging waste by businesses. We utilised 2.4 million of that as part of the rates process. However, we have now been advised of a 5.3 million allocation, i.e. an additional 2.9 million in the current financial year. So obviously that's very welcome news, members, and a very significant sum of money. One word of caution on it, there is a risk in conversations ongoing that may be restricted towards certain activities through SOLAS. We're obviously pushing back against that, so we just need time for those those discussions to conclude before we'll be able to bring back a report to members in relation to how we would allocate that additional funding. So members, that's the key issues at this early point in the year, and the recommendation is that you approve the outturn position and the associated consideration detailed in the report. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you for that, Alfie, and we have the recommendation here. So first councillor to speak is councillor McGinley.
Mega Chair, and thank you, Alfie, for the report. It is a positive one, and I think it's testament to the work of your team in terms of prudency with the finances of this council. The outturn of a surplus of 308k, I imagine, and correct me if I'm wrong, given the direction of travel at the time of the RITS process, is going towards our capital investment strategic leisure in that direction. Would that be fair, Alfie?
Yeah, so it's something, obviously, as the year goes on, we'll get to the point at the end of the year where hopefully we'll be in a surplus position, and then it'll be a decision of council as to what they allocate that towards. But certainly, we have very significant aspirations in that regard, and that'll be probably one of the first considerations.
Thanks for that. And just to note, and that's another small question in terms of the package and levy, that news, is there any indication in terms of the conversations that it may be restricted? And if it was, would it be in terms of, waste management? And because I know that's one of the biggest sort of areas of the budget.
So I suppose our initial view is that there shouldn't be any restrictions around it, because it's a compensation for costs that we are incurring and have been quantified. So the risk has been highlighted from just some initial communications we've got from the department. So immediately Solus is now engaging in that and trying to resolve those. But we're hopeful that it's basically a compensation for costs that we're incurring, and we will have that money to allocate towards whatever priorities we agree as a council, as opposed to being ring fenced. If it is ring fenced, I imagine would have to be towards waste activities or something like that.
It's brilliant. Thanks for that, Alfie. That's all I wanted to say. I'm content to propose the recommendation.
Thanks, Emma. And councillor Farrell.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks, Alfie, for the report. And like Councillor McGinley, I think it's really, really encouraging that we're in a positive position with a £308,000 surplus at this stage of the year. And I was going to ask a similar question regarding the package and levy. So our allocation for this year is 5.3 million. We've already received 2.4 million, so that means there's 2.9 million that we're unclear about, are we going to get it? And if there's going to be any restrictions. And I note your response to Councillor McGinley. When do you think we're going to have clarity on that? Because it is a sizable amount of money. It's going to have an impact definitely in the RITS process. We'd rather have that nearly £3 million instead of it sitting in Stormont. So do you have any understanding of when there will be clarity as to the future of that money? Thank you. But happy to second.
So we are receiving that money. It has been confirmed, so we will receive 5.3 million. The only issue is that will it be restricted and what we spend it on? We're trying to get clarity on that as soon as possible, because as you say, it's a very significant amount of money, and it's important that we're able to bring a report to council as to how we allocate that. So we're receiving the money. It's just whether there's any restrictions attached to it.
Through you, Chair. Members, just to add to that, in terms of future years, we don't yet know what our allocation may be. We expect it to go significantly down because obviously this is a levy on businesses who will change their business model accordingly. So I think just whilst it's very positive and it's great to see it, I think we just have to bear that in mind moving forward about, being careful about what we actually take into account in years to come.
Thanks, Karen. Councillor Farrell, did you second that? Yeah. Okay. So the next speaker then is Alderman Kerrigan.
Thank you very much, Chair, for allowing me in. Again, to be fair, Karen has touched on one of the points that I was going to raise in regards to the longevity, I suppose, of this packaging, because we are mindful, that was my view on it, that the businesses that are dealing with this and paying this levy will find alternatives, and therefore it will reduce what we are likely to get. And I'm just wondering if we no inclination at this stage how much of a reduction we're going to get caught with that. And then just two minor points, or two wee points there in regards to it. Your investment income, obviously, Alfie, is up significantly in that quarter. You know, are we expecting anything similar at all, or is it due to the higher interest rate, or is it due to effectively that there was significant money that had just matured in that first quarter, that's why effectively we have the surplus? Because I mean, I'm mindful that your investment income's 435 and our net surplus here is 308. So I mean, without that, you know, we'd be looking at a deficit here, but it's just sort of getting a rough inclination there, you know, whatever we wiped out, the majority of that, we're still an element of that coming anyway. And I know looking at it, it's the larger sum, but it doesn't have the percentage significance. Was just the sorry, Karen, is an ENR in regards to the 102,000 in regards to vehicle maintenance, and I know 102,000 is effectively our largest negative there. But whenever you're looking at effectively 5 million spent in that quarter, it's small percentage wise. But because it's vehicle maintenance, is that just a run of the mill end of things, or is it a case that is it something that would give you concern that we should be potentially looking at, or you know, our turnover in vehicles, or is it anything? I mean, we would, how would you word it? Myself and Alderman Hussey would get reasonable frequent emails to say that a lorry has broke down and there's no lorry going to spam out. You know, may not be that lorry broke down, but a lorry breaks down. And so it's just wondering, is there anything in those issues there? Or maybe it's just, as I say, numbers wise, it's large compared to the rest, but it's small and significant to the ENR budget. So just a couple of wee points of clarification. Thank you, Chair.
Yep, through you, Chair, just on that specific point, again, it is, you know, a large overall budget. We have quite a very significant fleet, as you understand. Obviously, it's something, as with any service that we have, that's something which will be very closely managed over the rest of the year in order to mitigate against that. Obviously, with vehicle maintenance, things happen at times when we just have to deal with them. However, it is something that we're very closely managing. Thank you.
So just in relation to the interest cost, there's two issues contributing to it. Number one, we have a significant sum of money on deposit. That's as a result of we're saving for two very significant strategic leisure projects. So I expect that to continue for this financial year until the point where we start spending money on the contractor for those projects. So that's the first contributor. Secondly, we're obviously in an environment where the interest rates are really high. That is benefiting us at the minute. How long it'll go on for, I don't know, but it's benefiting us at the minute. So we're getting well above 4% in all our funds, which is a fairly good rate. So there's two key issues contributing to it, and I expect them to continue in the short term.
Okay, Councillor Harkin, you're next.
Thank you, Chair. It's just a continued question about the packaging levy, and obviously if the council does receive or has received almost 3 million more, that is positive, and we can figure out what to spend that on, and there is a lot to spend it on. But Alfie, you said that there might be restrictions on it. The previous money that we received from this packaging levy, which was, I think, somewhere in the region of, what was it, 2.3 million or 3.4 million. Was there any restrictions on what we could spend that money on when we received it, or were we just able to utilise it as we saw fit?
We haven't received anything as yet. What we received back in February was an estimation of the amount that we would receive for the year. What we have subsequently received in the early months of the financial year, obviously after the rates process, was an updated figure, which was significantly higher. So At the time of the initial estimate, we weren't advised there would be any restrictions around it. As I said, it's a compensation for costs we're incurring. But as the process has gone on, there's been some doubts created about that, and we need to conclude those discussions with DAERA to be sure what we can spend the money on, and that's very actively going on at the minute. So hopefully we'll be able to bring clarity as soon as possible on that.
Okay, Councillor Tierney.
Chair, thank you. And it's just on that packaging levy, Alfie, if you don't mind. And I suppose it's similar to Councillor Harkins, but maybe Councillor Harkin might have been a wee bit in front. I want to know why there would be a levy on it, and what makes you think that there's going to be a levy on it? Because previously, as I understand it, there wasn't. Why is there going to be a levy on it, or what makes you think that there is going to be a restriction on it? Beg your pardon, a restriction on it.
I think, Chair, through you, there's just some ambiguity in the language that was coming with the correspondence that we received from DAERA in relation to it, which basically was discussed by councils through Solace, and they decided, look, we need to go back to DAERA and clarify our position is that this is for councils in order to be able to deal with this packaging, and therefore we are spending this money, so therefore when the levy that we receive, we should be able to decide on what it's spent on accordingly. I think really it was just that the language that was used, the councils weren't clear whether or not the department were trying to say that it should be used in a certain way. So we've gone back to them to try and get the clarification as quickly as possible on that. But certainly it would be our position as council, and I'm sure members would agree that, you know, this is compensation for councils for dealing with this type of waste, and therefore we should be able to spend it on whatever priorities council deem appropriate, and we will update members, as Alfie said, as soon as we get confirmation back from DAERA in relation to that. And I think that is a similar position across the whole UK. It's not just Northern Ireland. The respective departments within the other jurisdictions in the UK are having similar conversations with their central government departments as well. So we hope it'll be resolved very quickly, and we'll update members as quickly as we can.
Thanks, Karen, and Councillor Jackson.
Good Chair, and thanks to Alfie and Karen for some of the clarity, and I don't have a question, it's just a few points in relation to the packaging levy. I know there was extensive discussion around the packaging levy at the start of the year in advance of setting the rates, and we understand that it is going to fluctuate, and in all anybody looking at it realistically, we know that it's going to go down, but the costs incurred by council will go down as well, because there'll be less waste going to landfill, and that's a good thing. And you know, so that those two should correlate, and whilst we see the levy going down in future years, that should have a positive impact in council finances, given the significant budget that we have set aside towards waste management. And I just wanted to make an observation in relation to the money that's generated through the interest rates, and in one sense, it could be looked at as a positive. There's an income that's been generated by relatively high interest rates. From our perspective, we also acknowledge the construction inflation is a thing, and that the interest rates, the income generated at the minute, may be seen as a positive, but I think the best thing we can do for our ratepayers, the best thing that we can do to ensure value for money in terms of our capital projects, is to move into the delivery phase as soon as absolute possible, because inflation is there. Inflation is rising, and we know that these capital projects, the longer we leave them, the more expensive they're going to be. So it's just pointing that out, that there's a very short-term gain in relation to the interest rates, but it's a false economy if we think that we can bank on that. And from our party's perspective, we want to move into the delivery phase of our strategic leisure and our community projects as soon as absolutely possible. So I just wanted to make that point, but and there's no real questions associated with that. Thanks, Chair.
Alderman Hussey.
Yeah, just to briefly come in on Councillor Jackson's last point there, and to totally endorse his remarks. We all know that the longer you wait on these projects, the more expensive they become. And meanwhile, we have our citizens on the ground waiting for these various projects to be actioned. So if we can move to action as opposed, to standing still with cash sitting somewhere, so much the better. And I fully endorse his remarks on it. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Garmagat, August Garmagat, Alfie Asenturshin, thanks for that report. And next we're moving on to agenda item number 10, and it's over to Stephen.
Thank you, Chair. So, members, the purpose of this report is to update you on the work of the Temporary Accommodation Task Force, and also seek your permission to cease the work of that group, as largely the issues are now being dealt with through the Housing Crisis Task Force. So members will be perfectly aware of the background to these two groups that were set up. One, firstly in September 2023, which was in relation to a temporary accommodation task force, which had a specific agenda around the HMOs in certain areas in the city. Secondly, there was then a second motion in February 2024 relating to the wider Housing Crisis Task Force. Members will recall at the time there was discussion of whether these two groups were distinct or separate, and it was decided that they would run separately for now, but at a point in time may well converge. So following these motions, the groups were set up, and there have been various meetings over the months. At the last meeting of the Temporary Accommodation Task Force, it was agreed that largely the initial concerns had been raised and had been aired, and solutions has been found through the Housing Executive, etc., but that there was still a marked need for the Housing Crisis Task Force to continue to meet, and any further issues relating to temporary accommodation could be handled within that meeting. The next meeting of the Housing Crisis Task Force, which is, again, members will recall, is open to all elected members, is scheduled for the 16th of September at 2 p.m. So if members are in agreement, we would alter the terms of reference for that group accordingly to pick up any residual issues from the Temporary Accommodation Task Force. And on the basis of this, the recommendation is that the Temporary Accommodation Task Force ceases to meet, but all issues relating to housing are dealt with through the Housing Crisis Task Force. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Stephen. Okay, I'm going to need a proposer and a seconder for that. Okay, Councillor McGinley is proposing it, and Councillor Mooney seconding it. Councillor Harkin, do you want to speak on this?
Yeah, thank you for that, Stephen. And yeah, I think it's fine that we integrate the temporary accommodation task force with the Housing Crisis Task Force. And there's an absolute need for us to continue the work of the Housing Crisis Task Force, to scrutinise what the executive is doing, to campaign for social and affordable house building in our district, to try and address the infrastructure problems, and they also look at all the different things that are impacting the housing crisis, from HMO developments to other housing that's being turned over into commercial use, which I think has got more coverage during the summer in terms of the scale of the problem. So I think that's urgent for us as a council to be on the front foot with. I also think on the HMOs, I mean, there's been a tremendous amount of discussion, obviously, about this and debate leading up to the local development plan. And I've talked to quite a few residents who are continuing the campaign and ask questions of the council, university, and others. And one thing that's been raised to me, which I think that we should all be concerned about, and I'm going to just read this out. It's about HMOs. And this organisation says publicly, this is not even hidden, this practice has also over the last 2 years successfully avoided having to apply for planning permission for HMOs by successfully submitting and obtaining certificates of existing lawful development, CLUDE, for existing HMOs which have been operating continuously for over 5 years and are now immune from enforcement action. Now, the reason why I think we should be alarmed about this is because this is someone who is saying, you know what, you see all these, the policies that the council create around HMOs, 10%, 30%, all of that, whatever legislation exists, what this person is saying is ignore it, doesn't matter, there's a way around it. It doesn't matter that residents are agitated about HMOs or have concerns. It doesn't matter that the council's taking a stand. It does not matter. Here is a way for you to actually just completely avoid all the policies. And they're doing it out in the open. And this is exactly why we have been, these are the types of things that we have been discussing about individuals, organisations, businesses actually trying to find ways of getting around policy, getting around, anything that the council might be trying to do. And this is not even hidden. This is being promoted on a website. And this person's been in here at these council meetings where we've had these debates. So we are going to have to do something about this because this is not an acceptable way. This is unacceptable. This is the problem with open for business. This is actually making fools of the council and making fools of residents who are trying to campaign around it. So I think we are going to have to figure out how to deal with this CLUDE issue so that it doesn't negate everything that the council has attempted to try and do.
Okay, Councillor Farrell.
Thank you, Chair. I wasn't going to comment on Councillor Harkin's remarks because I didn't know what he was going to say, but obviously that's really concerning. And it's probably a matter for the planning committee and the enforcement team that we have employed to manage that sort of activity. My question was just about the housing crisis task force. Totally agree that the work of the temporary accommodation task force can be included on it. The last housing task force we had was back in July. I think the next one is happening this month. At that, we agreed that we're going to re-engage with DFC regarding the housing supply strategy. Obviously, the number of new builds across the north target is reduced from 2,000 to 1,000. And we need to understand, how this city and district is going to be impacted by that reduction. So could you indicate, Stephen, whether there will be representatives of DFC at the next meeting of the Housing Crisis Task Force, please? Thank you.
Through the chair, yes, representatives will be there. They will be dialing in remotely. They tried to come in person. It's not going to work. So rather than not have the meeting, we'll do it remotely, and then we can have further items in the agenda. But they will be there.
Councillor Jackson.
Yeah, good Chair. And I suppose I was planning to bring this up as part of a later item in the meeting, but I suppose it's appropriate they bring it on now. I would share the concerns that have been highlighted by Councillor Harkin. And we as a party have been highlighting this for some time, and that's part of the reason why we were initiated the review planning and try to have a more streamlined approach in relation to decisions being taken and enforcement being taken against unregulated activity, because it isn't acceptable that it's not acceptable that people can go 5 years without enforcement action being taken and then become immune from enforcement and get maybe potentially unacceptable development approved through a CLUD. So we do need to see improvements in relation to planning performance, and it is good to see within the report that's presented later on around the performance, that our planning enforcement cases have like 83% of them have been have been dealt with within the 39 weeks target. That's a positive move in the right direction, and you have seen like in over the past year or so significant improvements. We need to see more of that. We need to continue in that same trend. Unfortunately, there's maybe some slippages in relation to we're not meeting the targets in relation to decisions taken around major and local decisions. And I know when we did undertake that exercise around plan and review, there was some within this chamber who threw obstacles and barriers in the way and said that no, this isn't the way we should go. We have a housing crisis. We have huge barriers in relation to the delivery of much needed social homes. And we as a local council have a role to play. And our planning department, our planning system, we want from our party's perspective, we want this council area to have the most efficient and streamlined planning system where decisions are taken, whether they're approved or refused, that they're taken within as an efficient way as possible. We meet the targets of 30 weeks for a major application and 15 weeks for a local application. That's the targets we've set ourselves, and we meet, and in all enforcement cases are dealt with within 39 weeks. Those, if we're going to address our housing crisis, if we're going to maximise the potential that we've got in terms of growing our economy locally, we need our council to play our role, and I appreciate that others need to step up too, and we will be lobbying in that case. But from our responsibility as local elected councillors, we want to ensure that we're doing everything that we can to ensure that we deliver and on our objectives and do what we need to do to address the housing crisis and build much needed social homes. So I just wanted to highlight that there's been significant improvements in relation to enforcement. We need to see that continue, and I want to congratulate everybody that was involved in turning that around, because there had been concerns raised in the past, and I would hope that all members realise that we've got a responsibility as well. It's easy to point fingers at others, but we need to step up and do what we can and put measures in place locally to ensure that the processes that we've got in place, the services that we're running locally as a local council, are as efficient and as effective as possible. So, and that's what we're committed to do as a party, and we hope that others would stop sniping from the sidelines and join with us. Thanks, Chair.
And through you, Chair, members, just in terms of, I suppose, enforcement, specifically in and around the issue of houses of multiple occupation, that's something that we've been given a lot of consideration to over the last few months, to consider, how do we actually pick up potential properties that may be operating as a house of multiple occupation and don't have either planning permission or a licence or whatever statutory approvals that they need. And I think that the change from registration to licensing system has helped somewhat with that. We also engage with yourselves and with local residents to ask you to report any potential properties that you believe may be operating as houses of multiple occupation, because obviously then once we actually start an enforcement case, then they can't become immune from enforcement. So that's an important point to make. We will continue that work and we'll keep members updated over the next couple of months. And we really hope that issue will be able to be addressed through that particular stream of work. So thank you, Chair.
Chair Karen and Alderman Hussey.
Just to come in very briefly. As others have indicated, the information from Councillor Harkin is extremely worrying. And I suppose the validity of the claims therein are something that the Planning Committee need to be looking at, and indeed the mitigation of those claims. As Councillor Jackson has referred to there, this unregulated activity within the accommodation sector has got to be addressed, and that's a major part of the mitigation that would work in favour of Council's direction that they want to go going forward on, and specifically with regard to HMOs, but in regard to other operations within the planning service. Thank you.
Okay. Right, moving on to the next agenda item then, and that is with Ellen. Agenda item number 11.
Yes, through you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to provide members with an update on the dealing with the past working group, and also then to seek approval for the wind-up of this group. As set out in the report, this group was initially formed as a result of a motion in 2021, and we have met on there's been a number of attempts to identify nominations and hold meetings for this working group, but in the past it has proved difficult to make progress. The most recent meeting took place on the 18th of July and was attended by members as indicated in the report. And at this particular meeting, members considered a draft terms of reference and explored potential ways forward, all of which are identified within the report. The conclusion of those very constructive discussions were basically that members considered that there was no further work that the task and finish group could take forward at this time, and the recommendation in front of members today is that you approve the winding up of this working group on dealing with the past. Thank you, members.
Thanks, Ellen. So I'm looking for a proposer and a seconder for this agenda item. Alderman Hussey, I'm proposing it. I'm looking for a seconder there, please. Yep. Councillor McGinley, does anybody want to speak on that item? No. Okay, and then number 12, Ellen, that's over to you too.
We're winding this one up too.
Through you, Chair. Again, this is again, this is to provide members with an update on the constitutional change stroke unity working group and to seek endorsement of the approach set out in the report itself. Again, the report outlines the original motion, and the most recent meeting of this group took place on the 17th of July. As highlighted in the report again, the group heard details of recent research which are outlined in the report, and further to request made under Chair's business at the July Council meeting. Happy to report that Professor John Doyle will be presenting to this meeting in November, and that's outlined in the list of deputations identified later in this particular report. So the working group at that particular meeting identified and considered a draft invitation to groups and organisations in the trade union, education, Section 75 and social justice sectors, and in order to invite them to a future workshop. This workshop now is provisionally sort of penciled in for the end of this particular month, and in the coming days we'll firm up the invitee list and the invitations for issue. Further work will be progressed as on the procurement exercise for a specialist resource to design a community engagement plan, which furthers on from a previous decision of this committee. The recommendations in front of members today is that members endorse the approach outlined in the as indicated. Thank you, members.
Thanks, Ellen. Alderman Hussey.
So, quick query. 4.2 states there are no specific implications associated with the report financially. 3.4 talks about procurement. Is there any cost to that procurement?
Through you, Chair, there was a cost of £1,500, which was identified in the previous GSP item and agreed by this committee. Thank you.
Councillor Jackson.
Good Chair, and just on behalf of Sinn Féin, just to endorse the recommendation from the report. It's, and I'll maybe come back to Alderman Hussey's point in relation to the working group, and there is an expectation that this working group will wind up and the work of this working group will conclude. And I think that expectation is something that motivates myself in a way to come to this chamber and be involved in political activity. And this is, I suppose, the conversations are being had. Ellen outlined the date the working group took place and the discussions that took place in July. Since then, there's been a number of community festivals over the summer months where there's been real keen engagement, discussions and questions being asked around the constitutional future of this part of our island. And there's a momentum here. There's real excitement. There's real, people sense an opportunity in the air, and people are asking questions, having discussions, and realizing that our future is within our own hands, and that's where generations before us didn't have that opportunity. So there's excitement in relation to this, and I think it's brilliant that we as a council are leading the way in terms of facilitating the discussion, leading the way in terms of reaching out to other stakeholders and providing a platform for those questions to be asked, for those discussions to take place. And in relation to the 3.2 in the report, the opportunity for Professor John Doyle to come and present extensive work that he's carried out on the topic of constitutional change, and I would hope that our very own John Boyle would take part in those discussions as well. But no, there's progress being made. There's a lot more to be done, and I expect and hope that there'll be further deputations in relation to the constitutional question, and I'm very look forward to being part of those discussions. So, on behalf of Sinn Féin, more than happy to propose the recommendations in the report. Thanks, Chair.
Councillor Cheney.
Chair, thank you. And I'm happy on behalf of the SDLP to second the recommendations on the report. And I agree with an awful lot of what Councillor Jackson has said in relation to it. I think it is appropriate and fitting that the council is providing a platform for people to talk about the future. It's happening anyway, and council rightly need to be thinking about it, but also providing a platform for citizens to be considering it, organising towards it, and building forward for it. So we're more than happy with the approach which is outlined in the report. Councillor Jackson's right, there has been lots of conversations over the summer about the future of this island and what that may look like. Some people who may have a differing view to some of us were actually involved in trying to outline their position around what the future may look like, and credit to them for trying to do that. I think it was an important discussion to have, whilst I fundamentally disagree with it, but I think it was an important conversation to have, and other conversations around the future of this island and what it looks like. And I think it's really exciting. Councillor Jackson mentioned the word momentum. I think there is, can you imagine previous councillors in former councils, Derry City and Strabane District Council, having a conversation around Irish unity maybe 30, 40, 50 years ago. It never would have happened. There is momentum and it's building and it's coming. And in line and in the same spirit as Councillor Jackson's remarks around Alderman Hussey's view on the working group, it would be my view that the sooner this working group's wound up, the better for all of us, whoever that may be. Thank you very much.
Councillor Tierney and Councillor Harkin.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, look, I look forward to the presentation by Professor John Doyle, and it'll be interesting because it's about the finances of a united Ireland if a referendum happens soon, and I think that there is a lot of interest in that. And I see this working group and the work of the council as trying to facilitate a discussion about constitutional change and about how it could impact people, and if people are negative towards it, trying to address those questions. And so I don't think that this should be a taboo discussion or shut down. I think it should be welcomed because people are thinking about it, and I don't think anyone should run away from the debate. And I also hope that we have the opportunity to invite in other speakers as well, because look, I think some of the arguments about we need to build this big coalition to get rid of partition, I just don't see how entities like Moy Park or Dalradian or big banks will have the same interests as like working class communities, whether they're Protestant, Catholic or other, here in the north, or people from Ballymun or Finglas or Cork. And I do think that there's a lot of people who could be won over, I think, to a vision for a new Ireland if they thought that it would be it would actually give them a better start. But I don't think that hiding the fact that the very wealthy in society will be thinking about a new Ireland would be the way for them to actually make more wealth is going to be the way to do it. And I think that there's some people we should have address the council who are very critical of the way that the southern economy functions right now, because it is a tax haven that's unsustainable. And that's why I think John Doyle's presentation will be interesting, because he's looking at finances as they are right now. And I think that in a future Ireland, the economy that we have north and south right now might not be the one, certainly not the one I would like to see in a new Ireland, if it actually is to be a new Ireland.
Okay, yep, that one's done. Okay, Tayanish, we're gonna have a wee break now. Oh, sorry, Councillor Donnelly.
Got my good, Chair. Chair, look, I'm glad to have been involved in the working group. I have maybe a slightly different opinion of the way things are going or working out than Councillor Jackson. What I hear now from, to me, the border poll is coming from the Belfast Agreement, and in my opinion, that's a British strategy. And that is clearly audible in the language of constitutional and establishment nationalists. Gone is the language of sovereignty, self-determination, and it is being replaced with terminology such as agreed island and shared island. Gone is the talk of socialism and being replaced by open for business, and all this is couched in a motive rhetoric of peace and reconciliation. The border poll, the British have complete control over that aspect of the Belfast Agreement, which deals with constitutional change. And the primary purpose of a border poll is not what establishment nationalists hail it to be, but rather a mechanism where the British can determine the nature of any state that results from such a poll. And we can see that all gearing up with the neoliberal agendas and the attack on neutrality in the 26 counties. But there's no harm to have these conversations and engagements and listen to what people have to say. Garma.
Okay, Black and Woods, Sus, Bugginish, we're going to take a wee small break, and we'll be back in 5 minutes. All right. Okay, full chair Rash. Our next agenda item is agenda item number 13, and that is Ellen.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to inform members and seek approval for the proposed programme of events to promote local democracy 2025 and to encourage participation of members. As set out in the report, young people will have the opportunity to take part in a number of events that aim to boost dialogue between local councillors and young people with a view to strengthening local democracy and promoting citizenship and civic participation. In addition to the sort of the normal format that has taken place in previous years, and further to recent research regarding child rights-based approach and input from the Council's Children and Young People's Coordinator, we are also going to have an event which is seeking participation by young people whose views are seldom heard, for example, through youth clubs, the community and voluntary sector. And that particular activity will be facilitated by the Education Authority. Again, as I say, the recommendations in front of members are basically for your approval of the draft programme as set out in Agenda 1, and that the costs incurred will be allocated to the members' training and development budget, and that all members, where practical, are encouraged to get involved in promoting and participating in Local Democracy 2025. Thank you, members.
Thanks, Ellen. And our first speaker is Councillor McGinley.
Gurmega Chair and Gurmega Ellen for the report. I know I've taken part in previous local democracy weeks, and they are always really, really good events, and it's really good to have young people engaging in political conversation. Happy to endorse the both recommendations that are outlined in the report, but can I ask that section 3.4, where it highlights that it's about trying to seek participation from young people whose views are seldom heard, that the Irish language sector in terms of the youth groups and the Gael Scolanna are included in that, and alongside that also that the Education Authority aren't the only providers for youth services, and that the Youth Work Alliance is included in helping to facilitate that, because there is a broad community and voluntary sector within the youth sector, and I think that they should be included within this conversation as well. Thank you.
Gurmega, Alderman Hussey.
Thank you, Chair. I welcome the programme. I think since the start of Democracy Weeks, even before the existence of this joint council, there isn't one that I have missed. And they are a real joy to take part in and to hear views going forward. For clarity, what numbers are envisaged in each of the 4 proposed events? And then I have a question.
Through you, Chair, that's actually a difficult one to answer. We send out the invitations and encourage participation, but it's very much down to the schools themselves who they can release and what numbers they want to release. But as I say, we do be proactive in inviting anyone we can, and we'll also consider, you know, sort of if from the Strabane area, transport costs if that's necessary. Thank you.
Which brings me to my question. I think Ellen knows exactly what it is. I note all of the venues. There are none outside of the city. I know the Alley Theatre is closed and wouldn't be possible to use for an event going forward, but I mean, there is the likes of St. Pat's Hall and Strabane and other venues that could be used. There are venues in Castlederg that could be used. There are venues in Newton Stewart that can be used. I do have to express my concern that all of the events are basically where we're sitting now. And I don't find that appropriate if we want to reach out to all of our citizenry across the entire district council area. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Councillor Tierney.
Pardon me. Thank you, Chair, and thanks to Ellen for the report. Like others, I'm happy, more than happy to support the programme. Maybe not as many as Alderman Hussey, but I've attended a right few local democracy weeks myself, and always found them really enjoyable. some of the questions that you be asked by the young people definitely have you on the back foot. Very challenging, but very insightful to hear from local young people as well. At our group meeting last night, I was encouraging our group to get involved where we can, and we'll continue to do that and promote it as best we can as well. I do agree with the comments from Councillor McGinley, particularly around the community and voluntary sector, and reaching out to the likes of the Youth Work Alliance to see what they can get involved in as well, because as Councillor McGinley said, there is a massive community and voluntary sector which cater for youth programmes across the city and district. And we don't want to forget about them or leave them out. So I think that will be a very welcome addition if we were able to pull something off around that. I take on board Councillor Hussey's, or Alderman Hussey's, concerns around everything being in Derry, but I think we have to respect the fact that officers have made transport arrangements where possible as well. But if that is to be taken into consideration, then that's fine as well. I can understand why we should be engaging just outside of the city as well, and having some of these events outside the city. I think it looks like a very interesting week. It will be, without doubt, and we're only too happy to support it whenever we can. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Harkin.
Thank you, Chair. And yeah, happy to support this. And I think it's a very good initiative that the council does yearly. And we always talk about how important it is to engage with young people. And I very much welcome it, and I've enjoyed it every time I've got the opportunity to do it. There is obviously, for a lot of young people, a big disconnect between politicians and politics and the formality of it all and their experience. So I do like the fact that even there's an event here that even 5-year-olds at primary school would be welcome to come to. So, you know, from a very early age, just kind of normalising the Guildhall and breaking down the barriers or the perception of barriers that's for somebody else to do that is more equipped or, you know, from a different area of the city. I think that's a positive thing. And look, I think that I think what Alderman Hussey says is true. I think, look, you know, people like coming to the Guildhall because it's the main civic building. But look, I would be happy to go to Strabane, and I think we should utilise the Strabane council offices, and if there was something could be done in Castlederg or elsewhere, I think we need to kind of extend it out so that people feel like they're being engaged and make it accessible. And I think sometimes that's what the issue is. And look, this Democracy Week is happening while there's an active campaign for young people or younger people to get the right to vote at 16. We passed a very strong motion here before we broke for the summer, calling on the electoral office, Westminster Stormont, to facilitate young people being 16, 17-year-olds to be able to vote in the next election in 2027. And I also think that this is, a lot of young people do feel demonised at times by politicians. I think that some of the rhetoric around the burning down of the building at McGee, where young people were blamed, I think some of the discussion about young people being anti-community during the bonfire, I think it's very easy for people to throw out this, because I think that young people do, or some young people are quickly demonised. But I think that, like, young people look at politicians and they don't necessarily have a lot of respect for what politicians do, because look at the anti-poverty strategy. I mean, how can you have respect for institutions that, like, don't address fundamental issues in society? So I think that this is for a number of different reasons, I think Democracy Week is very, very good.
Councillor Donnelly.
Carmel, Chair, Councillor Harkin hasn't left me much other than to say that, like some of the previous speakers, I attend them almost religiously and I enjoy them, but I find them very educational. I enjoy talking to the young people, and I learn a lot from the young people there. And just to re-emphasise, you know, we did put a motion through they lower the age. And, you know, we need to value them young people. And I do agree with Councillor McGinley about people, you know, the youth advantage sector, because I do believe that there is a catchment within some of them, you know, organisations that will have young people that may be, and you know, what's termed as hard to reach. I'm not sure if that's the correct terminology to use, but I think it's important that we engage with as many young people as possible. And just finally, I also agree with Alderman Hussey. You know, if we can, there's no problem if there's something organised in Strabane or Castle Derg, then I would be very, very interested to go and hear the views and the thoughts of the young people involved. And I just want to thank council officers who came up with this and who have maintained it. It is one of the most enjoyable sort of programmes that I've been involved in my years as a councillor. So I'd like to thank them. Carmel.
Okay, Gurmagat, and online we have Alderman Cook.
Thanks, Chair, for letting me in, and thanks to Ellen for the report. I also think that local democracy is a great opportunity for young people, for them to get their voices heard and to learn what we do. And as Councillor Donnelly said as well, for us to learn from them. And I do agree as well with Alderman Hussey's points, maybe taking it to the more rural communities as well. So I would totally be up for that. So the DEP fully endorse this, and we look forward to the events. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I'm just checking that we got a proposer and seconder for that. Potentially we didn't. Yep, Councillor Harkin second, Councillor Emily, or Councillor Emily, I'm calling you. To make sure of Emma McGinley. Councillor McGinley proposed and Councillor Harkin second, thank you. Okay, so next agenda item is number 14, the annual performance report, and that's Ellen.
This report invites members' consideration and approval of the draft performance report for 24-25, which is attached as Appendix 1. The background report there highlights our statutory requirements to actually produce an annual performance report by the 30th of September each year and publish it online. And indeed, as I say, there's particular guidance from the Northern Ireland Audit Office in terms of the contents of that particular document, and obviously has to include a self-assessment of our performance, and in particular provide information on our attainment of our improvement objectives, and in terms of our statutory performance indicators, all of which are included. As you can see under the particular sort of key issues, we've set out the report itself in a standardised format. The one big difference I would highlight this year is we also include statistics on terms of complaints handling performance, and this is originated from the Northern Ireland Public Services Ombudsman's model scheme. So that information will be publicly available as well in that report. And as I say, the recommendations, I should also highlight in terms of the information that's produced in it, we've spotted an error in terms of transposing information on two indicators for the tonnage of waste identified. So the figure for 23-24 should be 4,076, and for 24-25, 4,070. The commentary there is correct. So subject to members' comments, the recommendation towards for today is to approve the publication with the amended figures, and that document will be made available on our website. Thank you, members.
Thanks, Ellen. And Councillor Jackson.
Good Chair, and thanks, Ellen, for the report. And I suppose in relation to the recommendation, they endorse it. I don't think there's much option in relation to that. So in that regard, happy to propose that the report's endorsed. It is what it is. It reflects on a wide range of work the council has undertaken. Everything from legal services to air quality control. There's a wide range, and it shows the scope of the work the council do. There's major positive developments that have been reflected in the report. The development of the Daisy Field is massive for that particular area, but no, that investment on the grassroots sport is really important for the health and well-being of young people, young athletes within our communities, and we want to see a lot more of that. The Daisy Field is an example that we want to see build on. The Acorn Farm is nearing completion, and we want to congratulate everybody that has been involved in that. They're active, the public realm around the diamond, the advancements of the projects at Mitchell Park. There's exciting projects that council and long-awaited projects that council are delivering on, and it's good to see that reflected in the report. So we just want to congratulate everybody involved in those projects. I know there's very ambitious targets that we've set ourselves around leisure users, and it's brilliant to see that despite setting very ambitious targets, we've met them, and it shows the growth of leisure users despite us having very aged facilities. So we know that serves us well as we move towards a delivery of the strategic leisure in Templemore and in Strabane Town. We had sort of highlighted some of the issues that we've seen in the report. I know the planning targets had been referred to in there in an earlier item, but throughout the report where we haven't met the targets, there's always been, or there's quite often in the report, there's commentary around why and steps and measures that have been taken to address that. I know in terms of planning, it referred to staff shortages. Can we get assurance that those have been addressed and that we can look forward to meeting those targets in future years, or at least closing the gap towards the disparities around what we actually deliver and the targets? In relation to plan and enforcement, we welcome the improved figures. As alluded to earlier, we want to build confidence in our enforcement team, and the best way we can build confidence is to have timely outcomes for people. So it's good to see that the vast majority of enforcement cases are closed within the 39-week target. The last item that I wanted to sort of focus in on, and I know there's a broad range and we could be here all day. I'm talking about all the different aspects of council, but one that has and I know it's raised at very regular in different committees, but it's in relation to the dog control service. It states within the report that there was £1,710 of fixed penalty payments in relation to dog controls. I know that from recent media articles, there's been 1,608 complaints made in relation to dog fouling alone, and there's only been 23 fines issued. Now, that is something that we're all as elected reps contacted about constantly. I just wouldn't mind a bit of clarity in relation to the figures, and I'm conscious that there's nobody here from the Health and Communities Directorate. And they state that there needs to be a bit of a focus in relation to addressing issues around dog fouling. We as a party have asked for a meeting with officers. So from a cross-directorate meeting, just around the thrash out ideas that we may have and to speak to officers around potential pilot schemes. So we would hope that that meeting could, the requests on, and we would hope that that meeting could take place as soon as possible. So, but in relation to endorsing the wider report, we have no issue. It's a factual state of play in relation to where we are at in terms of delivery in council, and it's largely positive. So we want to thank all officers for the work, not only in compiling the report, but in carrying out the work of the services on behalf of the people of the city and district. And we look forward to working with officers to address and improve some of the services that maybe we've fallen a wee bit short of the targets that we've set ourselves. So thanks, Chair, and look forward to working with officers.
Karen, I'm just noticing you're online there. Do you want to come in on that point? Sorry, Karen McFarland.
Through you, Chair, members, just commenting on, I suppose specifically on the planning resources. Members, you are aware that we have been working very hard in terms of ensuring that we have our full complement of staff and planning. Certainly we're getting there, and we have, engage on it. The head of planning, the head of HR and myself will meet regularly in order to review that. And we have recently appointed additional resources, which we hope will help us in terms of that. I think it's one of those careers where it's not the easiest to actually get members of staff. However, we have been very successful recently in appointing additional resources. So it's something we keep on top of very regularly. So just to denote that, and I hope that will help reflect in the targets as we move forward.
Thanks. And sorry, Karen McFarland, just to throw you under the bus there and bring you in online, but I see you there now. So if you just want to come in that point.
I couldn't get my mute off there in time. So thank you for that. Members, we're conscious just of recent publicity around a series of issues in terms of dog control, and including the issue of fines and penalties. So the team are looking at that with a view to bringing back in a report. And I suppose the sort of issues emerge from the fact that, yes, we do have significant complaints. We do need to have evidence by means of individuals who have witnessed any particular incidents, willing to give evidence in respect of that, and that sometimes lowers the numbers of cases, and obviously quite significantly in this context. So there should come a report back, and most probably to the October committee, if that is appropriate. Members, thank you.
Thanks very much, Karen. Councillor Farrell.
Thank you, Chair, and I'd like to second the report on behalf of the SDLP, and I would echo everything that Councillor Jackson has said. There's been significant progress made in the last year, and that's down to the efforts and the dedication of not just the officer team, but every single member of staff employed in council. They all do their bit. So that's to be celebrated and welcomed. But I've got one question. It's regarding, there's a section in under business support about the McGee task force, where we had provided the strategic narrative for the action plan. We note that the action plan for the McGee task force, the final action plan, was published in December of last year. We had Stephen Kelly on that month. Since then, we've had further engagement back in April of this year, and we're just conscious that the expansion at McGee is critical to the development and growth of this city and district. What we would like to see, and it was agreed previously that there would be regular updates. I'm conscious that we're fast approaching the 1-year anniversary of the publication of the plan, And I note that deputations, the schedule is already full for October, November, December. So my question is there future engagement? What's the task force planned in the near future? And I would also note at the committee in April, we had resolved to write to the Minister for the Economy, asking that all capital and revenue proposals were ring-fenced in future budgets. I haven't seen a response from the Economy Minister yet. So I would ask that that's possibly chased up. And just for ease of reference, it's SC 3525. So I would ask that that correspondence is chased up. And I'm also asking, is there future engagement in terms of the task force presenting the council? Because we are approaching the first anniversary and we'd like to know what's happened in the past year. Thank you.
Thanks. And John has just come in online there to say that he's happy to follow up with the task force. Okay. Okay, I didn't have any other indicated speakers for that agenda item. Nope, ready to move on. So the next one then is number 15, and that is Rachel's taking us through that one. Yep.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to update members of the committee on the co-design and co-production of the Plan for Neighbourhoods in the city. As you're aware, the Plan for Neighbourhoods is a 10-year, £20 million investment allocated into the city, and we are one of only 2 localities, Northern Ireland ourselves and Coleraine. And the initiative is aimed to promote thriving places and local empowerment. Funding is split 75 capital, 25 revenue, and we have £600,000 within that envelope earmarked for capacity building. Members will be aware we've previously agreed that this programme will align with the strategic growth plan and partnerships, and also the local growth plans and partnerships. And we have appointed 3 co-chairs and a board membership based on our existing community planning models. Members, there's a link there in your pack to all the government guidance in relation to the Plan for Neighbourhoods. And I suppose there's an imminent deadline in front of us in terms of the 10-year regeneration plan and 4-year investment plan, which we need to submit by November of this year, with a view that the funding will be released in April. So just as an update to keep you up to date, 3 meetings of the board have been held to date, one in May and the second in June in Gallia Community Centre, and the most recent meeting was held in June in the Millennium Forum. We're due to have another meeting now on the 12th of September in the Waterside Shared Village. So during those meetings, members have considered obviously the detailed guidance that's come from government on the Plan for Neighbourhoods. They've agreed a framework for governance, including a terms of reference, a conflict of interest policy and a code of conduct. They also agreed an illustrative allocation of funding based on the profile that was given to us by government, and received an update on the local economic partnership to make sure that there's synergies between the 2 partnerships and funds. So you'll be aware that the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government asked us to submit recommendations in relation to the board membership and also the boundaries. And I'm pleased to say in late July, the government have come back and said that they're content with our recommendations, which is great. So which means that we'll move to formally launch the partnership now in the autumn. In accordance with the guidelines, we've also initiated a dedicated web page for the Plan for Neighbourhoods, and it's on our community planning website, growderrystrabane.com. So all agendas, all approved minutes and the board membership is online now to increase transparency and openness. And also as a means of update, we had 3 officials from the department in the city on the 19th of June. And they were given a tour of the city and a very detailed talk by the regeneration manager, and had meetings with the 3 co-chairs. So what we're doing now, members, is we're moving to consider eligible capital revenue and capacity building projects, which would have the potential for inclusion in the investment plan. And this is a 4-year investment plan from 2016 to 2030. It has to be submitted to government by November, as I said. So what we've done is we've put a call out to sort of see if we could put forward some eligible projects over the summer period. And that calls out will close tomorrow. These potential projects are to be considered by the co-chairs and an independent panel of board members. And they're considering, we want to look at the bids based on an agreed set of criteria, namely deliverability, because capital funding will flow from the 1st of April. Obviously, we want to make sure that it's leveraged, that it's part of a funding package need, and crucially, it's aligned to the strategic growth plan and the local growth plans, and that it will have sustainability post-funding. So we have also agreed a set of principles for the administration of the funding, and that's detailed in section 3.8 there for your information. And finally, just to let you know that in terms of the funding, we've received another tranche of funding in through, so we've now £450,000, and that's capacity building funding, which has come from the government to support the development of the board and the plan. So the recommendations in front of you today, Chair, is just that members endorse the progress to date, namely that the UKG has approved the recommended board and boundary membership, that we've launched the website, and that we're moving now to consider potential projects for the 4-year investment plan. And obviously, we will continue to keep the Governance and Strategic Planning Committee updated as progress continues. Thank you.
Rachel. So we have a proposal in front of us there for, we just need a proposer and a seconder for it. If anybody has any comments, Councillor Farrell.
Declare an interest as a board member, but happy to propose. Thank you.
Councillor Jackson, second, yep. Okay, we've no further comments on that one then. So the next items then, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21 are open for business. Does anybody have anything in particular they want to bring up under any of those agenda items? No, okay. So we'll go into confidential then. Can I have a proposer and a seconder for confidential? That's Councillor Tierney and Councillor Money.